One would be the extent to which ACE is aligning work across different sectors so that it becomes cross-sectorial. Another element of holistic ACE would be that it goes beyond focusing only, for example, in the area of education and training, only on knowledge and the cognitive dimension, but also engages in the dimension of social emotional learning or action-oriented or behavioral learning, which would be another way of thinking of a holistic area. We only see a few countries that kind of capture this holistic conception of ACE, but it's important to note that it has concretization, or it can be found in very particular country contexts. We're also very interested in the issue of climate justice, or the extent to which countries are focused on a justice emphasis in the different aspects of ACE, whether it be in education, training, or communication. So some of our measures are specifically oriented in trying to determine the extent to which justice is explicitly incorporated as a dimension in their programs, initiatives, and policies. I'm going to just briefly mention how we've built up our website. We're very proud of having worked very hard over the last year to get to a point where we now have an interactive data platform in which information now is easily accessible. There are three kinds of information that you'll find on the data platform. One are the country profiles. We have 50 of those that will be mentioned in just a moment. The various kinds of measures and indicators that I've been leading a team on, and also case studies that we've recently funded and that are in development. So all of that information is now on our interactive data platform, and you are invited to take a look at it. It's important, I think, to see that the issue of monitoring and evaluation has emerged over the last few years in the COP process, especially with respect to ACE, the Action for Climate Empowerment. And it's clear that many countries see it as potentially a burden on them, both in terms of allocating resources to monitoring, evaluating, and reporting. I think part of our project is to show that there's lots of information that's currently available that can be repurposed or reorganized or redesigned in order to assist countries in carrying out conversations around monitoring, evaluation, and training. And I think that's the thrust of much of what we're doing. We have not asked resources from countries to contribute to our project. We've been very honored to get sponsorship from the Canadian government for a 6-year partnership grant. The fact that we have a very large number of partners enables us to really build on many different resources, institutional, scholarly, and NGO, civil society organizations. So we really see that it's a collective endeavor to try to provide a wide array of diverse kinds of information in this overall category of monitoring, evaluating, and reporting that doesn't create a burden on countries, but rather provides a platform for conversations and dialogue around these kinds of issues. And in particular, we hope that it provides countries with an opportunity to see how they can move forward with the commitments that they have made, often in relationship to implementation successes by other countries in other parts of the world. We also think that partly, and that really gets to the point that I just made, that the information that we're making available, both in terms of the country profiles but also the indicators, allows countries to learn from each other. So there's a lot of peer learning. Often countries are particularly interested in what's going on in their neighborhood, in their region, or in their sub-region. So we've also set up regional hubs and are engaging with different regional organizations in order to assist this kind of region-based peer learning mechanism, which I think is also very important as a way of contributing to advancing ACE over time. Here's a kind of an overall summary of the work that the MECCE project has done over the last 2 years. We'll hear in just a moment the 50 ACE profiles that have been completed and validated by country experts. We put online 30 new profiles in conjunction with the COP process, or this COP meeting. We intend to complete another 20 to 30 profiles in the next year. This is a project that we're collaborating with the Global Education Monitoring Report team at UNESCO headquarters, and we're very pleased with that collaboration. I've been working on the indicators that I'll mention in just a moment, the different case studies. Partly what we've been able to do is also set aside some of the funds that the Canadian government has provided to drill down and give a much more qualitative, in-depth, contextualized understanding of various kinds of quality ACE and climate change education and communication in particular locales, whether it be at the local or even at the national level. And we had more than 160 or so proposals that were evaluated by a series of experts, 12 of which received funding, and these are all ongoing projects. We hope to be able to report on them at next year's COP meeting. We also have a colleague who's engaged in some very interesting knowledge synthesis work based on different regional publications that have emerged around quality climate change education and communication. Much of this is still almost finalized, and we hope to be able to put on the website for people to take a look at in the near future. And I just mentioned before the regional hubs. We also do webinars and are involved in various kinds of learning institutes. Here are the different 9 indicators that we finalized. We see this as the first suite of indicators that we have put together. You can see that there are a series of indicators that are related to the communication side of things. We have 2 in terms of public awareness, 2 in terms of public access to information, 1 in terms of public participation, and then you see the other 4 indicators related to education and training. Each of these are based on different data sources. Most of the ones on communication are based on what I would call third-party data sources. In other words, other entities that have engaged in systematic surveys based on adult populations, Gallup polls and the like, that we have used, gotten access to the information, and repurposed it for the purposes of an ACE indicator. Whereas in the education and training side of things, these are things that the MECCE project team has both collected the basic data and then analyzed it in different ways to make it relevant for different kinds of monitoring and evaluation. Here's an example of the data that we have available on public participation. This is based on the Yale study, correct? Yes. So this is based on the Facebook users that provided information on a survey, and these are aggregate figures that we have for, I believe, 108 countries. You can see some of the averages of what we've divided public participation in these different levels, and they come out there in terms of which countries or what proportion of countries in each region are more or less in demonstrating public being more or less involved in different kinds of climate communication and participation. We're very interested, and this is part of the rationale for this gathering today, is to think about how to develop indicators that would also speak to the concerns of young people and also reflect much of their distinctive activities and interests. These are things that we are hoping to be able to build up over time. So much of this would be how to take some of the information we currently have and tease out some way of measuring specific indicators related to young people or younger strata, and then see this as a kind of a cross-cutting issue that would indicate all the different elements in ACE. So this is still ongoing, but it gives you an idea of some of the work that we are hoping to engage in we have two indicators right now that certainly represent the views of youth. One is based on PISA data, the OECD PISA study on learning outcomes, and the other is based on the Facebook survey. So with that, I'm going to finish my initial presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have very quickly.
Very nice. Okay, does anybody have any questions for Aaron? We have time for one question. Yes? Yeah, we can take your question.
Oh, I'll be very short. So I'm a postdoctoral researcher from McGill University and currently a faculty of education. So I would like to ask the question from like more looking inward from academics perspectives, like higher education. I noticed that you mentioned the word that you use is monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. And we work a lot in program design thinking about monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So basically what you mentioned about like the learning iterative process of program design. And so I wonder if you can speak a little bit about that, thinking about similar program, can it happen at other universities? And if so, what kind of lessons that we can draw from it? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. Higher education is perhaps one of the more challenging areas that we've been thinking about. We've been very pleased to work with the International Association of Universities, which is the kind of main NGO that brings together universities from around the world. They carry out a survey on sustainable development. Part of our collaboration was to work with them to define 6 questions that they were kind enough to place in their survey, and we used some of the data from that. We started to develop potentially an indicator. Unfortunately, the sample response from that survey was very unrepresentative. And keep in mind, the information that we're trying to make available is for country representatives that are involved in ACE negotiations, other policymakers. So in some sense, we need to be able to find ways to aggregate information about higher education institutions at the national level. And that aggregation often poses a challenge. And how do you take information that may be enormously important and impactful at the institutional level in terms of a university or a college engaged in all kinds of sustainability practices, but aggregate that information to a national level and the extent to which the information you might have would or would not be representative of the country as a whole. In the end, the indicator that we chose to work with was based on the Web of Science. So we worked with the company that owns the Web of Science. They collate all the peer-reviewed articles in, I believe it's about 21,000 different journals in all the different disciplines. And what we asked them to do was to query in their database any article that in the title or in a keyword mentions the word climate, climate action, climate justice, sustainability. And out of that query, we got something like 70,000 articles, of which we then had to figure out where do you place the authors. There are multiple authors of many articles. Which countries are they affiliated with? And then try to figure out, because in the end you have mainly lots of articles in the US and China and some of the big countries that have large higher education sectors. So it needed to be standardized, something like, you know, the number of researchers. We used a particular indicator for that. So in the end, that we felt that that was a more complete, valid, national level indicator that gives us some indication of the research productivity of the higher education sector in each of the different countries. Now, I mean, the one thing that I just want to add here, and then I know I need to end, is that much of what we put online right now would be what kind of data is available, even though it's not the most ideal information that we would like. And I think in the next year or two, as the project goes forward, it's a 6-year project, we hope to be able to move away from what exists and therefore that gives us a reasonable idea of what's available or some aspect of the ACE program and what we'd ideally like to have. So indicators, let's say, of climate justice, indicators of indigenous populations' participation in ACE, and many other kinds of issues like this. Those are things that we have to think about. How could we create new sources of information or repurpose even the ones that we have?
Great. Thank you, Aaron. We are going to have time for a bigger question and answer period after, so it's good that you have a question. Just keep it in mind. I'm going to open it up to Stephanie Mallow now to talk about our country profiles work and some of our indicators.
Hello everyone. I'm very happy to tell you about our country profiles. Thanks to our fantastic team of research assistants, we now have 50 country profiles covering all regions. We also have a couple of unusual suspects. The country profiles describe what the country does in prioritization and implementation of ACE policy and practice. We do collect the data ourselves, so this is also an indication of what is actually available publicly. This means that we are analyzing policy documents like national communications, national adaptation plans, national determined contributions, all different kinds of documents to write those profiles. They're quite comprehensive, and I would like to invite you to look at our website to read them. They're very interesting, actually. And we have also different levels of filters available, so you can see per different region those things. Next year, for next COP, we will publish between 20 and 30 new profiles. So there is an ongoing process, and we do develop those country profiles together with the UNESCO Global Education Monitoring Report, and we are very grateful for the partnership here. Here is a brief overview of the content. As I said, they're quite comprehensive. So we do cover country contexts in which we also describe the government structure. So we do collect data on most, if not all, government organizations involved in ACE in the countries. We do also analyze terminology. Climate change education and communication is often part of already existing structures, such as environmental education, education for sustainable development, global citizen education, and nowadays also disaster risk education. So we do look where is ACE actually embedded in a country. Then we do have a section on climate change education and training in the country. This also covers informal and TVET. We do have climate change communication, looking at public awareness, public access to information, and public participation. And finally, we do have a monitoring and evaluation sector, looking what is actually available. And we also do include our own analysis from the other parts of the MECCE project. We did actually have a look at youth in the country profiles. We did find that 86% of countries do include youth in their initiatives. However, it's mostly ad hoc. This means that there are lots of events happening. There are different ones. We have some example here, like the Canada Youth Summit. But however, it's very rare that they do appear in strategies and plans, which is something that I think could be improved. We also have a couple of other very interesting indicators, such as girls and gender. And I would like to invite you to have a look at our blog post. It's down there in the corner, and our brochure that we developed together with the UNESCO GEM report to know more about the country profiles. Thank you.
So we are going to hand it over to Susanna to discuss a little bit of youth engagement in ACE. And then we'll take some questions. So think about some things you would like to ask Stephanie and Susanna.
Yes, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this session and inviting YOUNGO to this session and having youth voices here. I really appreciate that. I think it's really important. And also really wanted to say thank you to the MECCE team for for your transparent work in monitoring and actual research on ACE implementation, which I think is really important and really lacking so far. So congratulations on your work, and also thank you for including so many different elements, including youth. Because youth is definitely at the center of ACE, and young people are already leading the implementation of ACE and are already leading the discussion around ACE with a really strong, clear message for inclusion of civil society, transparency, climate justice, support for ACE, balanced but ambitious approach in ACE. So I really think, as it was mentioned before, that youth voices are heard very well here, and I will start with this. Of course, youth engagement in ACE is a huge topic, absolutely, because it's not only about, you know, ACE here within the UNFCCC, but also about many projects that are happening independently of this. People are doing a lot of amazing work in the context of ACE, not even knowing the concept of ACE. So that's also probably why we should promote it more and we should talk about it. And yeah, as I'm here representing the YOUNGO ACE working group, I will maybe start with that, say a little bit about what we are doing. So we are a working group of the YOUNGO constituency, that's the Children and Youth constituency of the UNFCCC. And we are a very open space, everyone is welcome to join us and work with us, basically throughout the whole year, but we are mostly focused on the COPs and on the negotiations here within this space. And we've been also participating this year at the COP27 very actively. We had a few demands on behalf of youth. First of all, definitely demanding meaningful youth inclusion in both decision-making and implementation of ACE. Then also we were fighting for financial support and practical support for ACE activities, which we think is extremely important, and this discussion is still lacking, and we definitely need to highlight it more. And we also talked about the importance of for countries to develop their national ACE strategies, so specific plans that would outline how they approach ACE in this particular country. Also involving, of course, the engagement of youth, which is still one of our demands that we will be advocating for. A lot of our points were included in the action plan that was mentioned, so we are quite happy about it, but still we are a bit worried about what's going next, because what's going next is going to be implementation of this, and this is always very different, and this also involves national context, and I've got an impression that we are all here living, you know, in kind of a bubble within the UNFCCC system, and there's a lot of youth engagement on ACE also on other levels, internationally, nationally, locally. For example, I have an organization, as it was told before. We are doing a project called Open Dialogues on Climate Change, and this is about organizing open discussions between different stakeholder groups, different social groups, bringing them all together to discuss climate change. This happens in a lot of different countries, and definitely also is part of the framework of ACE. And there's a lot of initiatives like this, which we should also really remember about, and we should support those initiatives. I think this is really important to kind of connect the dots between all the different activities that are happening, all the different actors, because there are so many ideas within the civil society and within youth that are sometimes not implemented. So we really wish that this can get even better. We have some hope right now, and yeah, I think that's it on my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Susanna. Does anyone have any questions for our youth? Oh, we'll save the questions for Erin until later. But anyone have any questions about YOUNGO or about, Stephanie has all sorts of thoughts about youth and how they could be engaged in ACE strategies and plans.
I would really like. Could you please comment about education, about climate change education from K to 12? When do you think it should begin? What generally do you think children should do? Should they learn the science? Should they learn to do?
Thank you for this question. I think it's definitely a very important question, and I'm happy to answer this because I'm also personally working a lot on climate education. I'm from Poland, as you maybe didn't know, and in Poland we are fighting really hard to include climate education in schools for children to learn. This is definitely not present in our country, and what I would love to see I'd love to see, climate education present at all levels and in all different areas. So now it's really mostly about informal education where you can get this knowledge, and it should be also about, the basic education that you get starting from your primary school, then going on. Showing people, most importantly, the impacts of climate change, of course, based on the best available science. This is a very important aspect here. But we should show them also in practice how this is affecting them and how they can contribute to solving it. We should start teaching it from the very young age and very beginning, because education is actually the basis of everything. ACE is the basis of everything, because if we don't have an educated society, if we don't have an aware society with access to information and with public participation, we definitely cannot solve the climate crisis. So that's absolutely the basis, and I hope it will also get better in this topic, and that we will get more attention to this topic, because so far it's still so much neglected by many people, especially by many governments. So we need to advocate for this, and I'm happy that there's so many people here who see the importance of this topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to learn more about how you will bring from here lessons learned towards COP28, because you had been to negotiations on ACE, and what was the essence of it? How will you work afterwards on ACE? And second, I believe there should be a strong link between Convention of Biodiversity. Do you follow the other conventions and educations as well, or do you have in contact with other young people who are working on Convention on Biodiversity or other conventions as well? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's really also important that what you're saying. I'm personally not following very much the Biodiversity Convention, but I know many people who are there, and we are definitely in touch with each other. And a lot of our work is about trying to identify, how the concept of ACE and the elements of ACE are also present in other topics. Haley is going to talk about it very soon, so maybe she can also ask your question. But coming back to the first one, what we are going to do afterwards. Well, we are going to continue our actions and our advocacy, of course, because not all of our demands were achieved here. You can never live with all your demands actually achieved. We will definitely push for, most importantly, I think, more support for specific ACE activities and ACE projects, including financial support, because this is really important, and we've been pushing for it for a very long time, and it's still very difficult to convince, especially the governments, that this is needed and that ACE is a real topic that also needs support. So we are going to show our presence and also show that young people are very important in this process. This is improving, I would say, over time. So I'm really happy about this, but there's still a lot to fight for. So we will definitely now focus on seeing what was achieved here, what's included in the ACE action plan, and how we can follow up on all the different elements and how we can leverage all the actions included there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanna, and thank you for the questions. Very good, insightful questions, and I think we'll have a lot to talk about in our breakout groups. I'm going to hand it over now to Haley Campbell so she can discuss mainstreaming of ACE across COP.
Cool. Hello? 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 All right. It's so weird. It's so fun that it's gold because I feel like, oh, this is so special, like a golden microphone. But thank you so much, and apologies for being a little bit late. I was coming from a different meeting on ACE-related things. So theme of the day, is this better? Is this better? Hello? Okay. Theme of the day, though, so I really want to give a quick shout-out first to ACE Day. Woo! Who's excited for ACE Day? Yeah, that's what I love to see. So thank you so much for coming. And I'm going to be talking about mainstreaming of ACE. And that does sound pretty jargony. So I might start with talking about what does it mean to mainstream this topic. And as you were mentioning in your question, right, ACE is really interconnected to a lot of different work streams. And it's not as connected, though, as we'd like it to be in the COP space. For example, in nationally determined contributions, NDCs, we rarely see the mentioning of all the 6 elements of ACE. Some countries will talk about education, some will talk about participation, but rarely is there a connection to all of the different elements, which we all know are essential because, you know, for instance, not everyone maybe wants to participate in these spaces. Some people do, but not every single young person, for instance, that I know wants to be a part of this space, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean that they don't want to know about what's going on or that they don't want to have access to information or the opportunity to raise awareness on these topics. And so it's really important when we're talking about ACE that we're not just talking about the singular education element or awareness raising element. And the concept of mainstreaming ACE is thinking about how can we ensure that when we're talking about these elements, they're interconnected to things like NDCs, national communications, and also domestically too on hopefully creation of ACE strategies, which we all know when you're dealing with government, unless there's a goal or a plan or something written down in a document somewhere that tells them they should do something, they're probably not going to do it out of the goodness of their heart, just because that's not really how government works. There needs to be some type of mechanism that can push them to do more, and that is at the international as well as the national level. So for mainstreaming ACE, I think it's so loud. I'm really trying to yell into this microphone. I think it's really, really important that we're bringing these conversations to the forefront at COP because oftentimes ACE is not talked about in any spaces. For example, a lot of the heads of delegation I've met with have no idea what's going on in the ACE agenda, which is really, really telling because if the heads of our delegation don't know what's going on how to empower their own communities back at home to be talking about climate change, then how can we expect anything to change in our communities? How can we expect, you know, people like my grandma who I've been able to empower personally, but I'm not going to be able to empower Susanna's grandma on my own, right? How can we empower all of the other people in the world to be a part of these conversations? And so hopefully through more conversations, more dialogue, the new short-term action plan that was just agreed to on Saturday, there'll be more opportunities to really start implementing ACE And also these implementations will be able to inform projects like the MECCE project that we're here to talk about a lot today. And so ultimately, we're hoping to be able to have all the different elements of ACE integrated into everything that we're doing, because we don't want to leave any community member behind in this fight for a climate just future, and we also want to make sure that we're not unintentionally leaving them behind by not empowering them to be a part of the solution to the climate crisis through having all the different access to the ACE elements in their communities. That's all I got for y'all.
Thank you, Haley. Wow, it got really loud very suddenly, didn't it? So sorry, we're talking as loud as we can. I think that the idea of mainstreaming ACE is extremely fascinating because you know, like for me, a lot of the political inaction that we see is an ACE problem. You know, if we had better ACE, we would have better government action, and so it's something that is cross-cutting across all of these negotiations for me. And you do see it siloed into these smaller rooms, and there's not as many negotiators and not very much time to discuss. So I was really happy when you proposed the topic to discuss, because I think it's really vital. Does anybody have any questions for Haley, or in general? We can open up a little bit for some questions. I know that you had a question for Aaron, so we'll start there and see where the time takes us.
So it's a question for Aaron, please. Research has been unclear at best regarding the connection between knowledge and action and behavior. And I was wondering if you think that your research could put more light on this question.
So I see the work that we're doing as so first of all, keep in mind there are multiple projects or multiple kind of facets of the MECCE project. So for example, the knowledge synthesis part speaks precisely, I think, to that issue of trying to determine what are some of the major topics and themes that emerge from different kinds of publications and different kinds of reports and research in each of the different SDG regions. And they're not always the same. So first of all, you get an idea a little bit about the importance of context and culture and the extent to which, you know, this relationship is stronger or more prevalent or less prevalent. I mean, also keep in mind that it isn't our mandate to kind of give an overview of what the research suggests in terms of the impact of knowledge on action. I mean, there's lots of people that kind of look in that question. We're much more interested in trying to figure out what aspects of the ACE program can be reflected in various kinds of data, both quantitative and qualitative, that can contribute to the kinds of conversations that go on both at the international level, at the regional level, and also at the national level. So, I mean, I would say that our work can help to perhaps identify, you know, critical issues that emerge from some of the regions that need to be looked at a little bit more in detail. But I don't think that it provides precisely the, you know, the answer to the question that you asked.
I actually have a little bit to add on to that as well. Yeah, so we do have another knowledge synthesis that's looking at psychosocial factors associated with climate action or actually inaction. So it is actually a well-known psychological finding that changing someone's attitudes is not well correlated with changing behavior. But that sort of research hasn't really been brought into the educational field. So one of the reasons that we're doing this lit review, it is being conducted by a team out of Stanford University under the leadership of Nicole Ardouin. They have compiled some literature that they're using to kind of unpack the types of inactions and cultural discourses that we see associated with anxiety, denialism, because they're all very integrally related. I think there's a counterintuitive finding in our indicators where the higher the public awareness, it's lower action. But it makes sense when you get so stressed out you don't even know what to do, and then you don't have tools at your disposal because we're all focusing on individual level action that you can be carrying out. There's not a focus on systemic changes that you could be making, so people feel disempowered. So we are trying to unpack that a little bit, and those sorts of dynamics will also be captured a little bit in our case studies. So the Office for Climate Education, we have their president, Eric, here today. Their group is looking at a teacher training resource to help students with climate anxiety. So we're starting to try to tease apart some of those dynamics with the work. Adriana.
Thanks a lot, Nicola. And Aaron, first of all, congratulations for putting this panel together, but especially for the excellent work that you are doing. And one of the questions that I always have, Aaron, is about the topic of adaptation. It is the COP of adaptation. And when you were doing some of the country profiles and the review of the curriculum, you mentioned that there is not a lot of data in Africa. Then my question is, in the last months, how has been the process regarding, have you identified how adaptation is included into the education curriculum, materials, and projects? If you have maybe some updates. Thank you.
So I'm just going to mention that we have the country profiles that are looking exactly at that, right? How can we get data from countries that are sometimes overlooked or where it's difficult to get data? So we do spend a lot of hours on collecting data from official documents, and we are trying to choose countries that are maybe not always there, right? So, but that is quantitative data, and also in the case studies we do try. We had a lot of proposals from many different countries, and right now we only have 12, but during the course of the project there will be more case studies that will look at qualitative data. And Erin can then tell more about the indicators.
So in my view, part of the challenge is in developing an indicator. Often, even if you have a very strong set of data sources, official data sources, policy documents, national curricular frameworks, education sector plans, and we've compiled literally, dozens for countries around the world. How do you then take all this information in 20, 30 different languages and find a way to analyze it to answer like the questions that you're asking, right? It's a very challenging way to do it. First of all, you need lots of research assistance. It takes a lot of time and quite a lot of effort, right, to figure out what would be the keywords you do. One of the things that I think we see happen, that we would like to see as potentially a solution to that enormous challenge, is to figure out, would it be possible to use natural language processing, machine learning, and other forms of AI to get a more nuanced understanding beyond the kind of simple keyword searches that we do, that would help to address, issues like adaptation, resilience, mitigation strategies, without having to read in excruciating detail, let's say a 600-page document of such sorts, right? So, and I think we can do it. I mean, certainly the technology is there. We have people in our partnership who have expertise in this area. We recently appear to have some interest by Microsoft to work with us in this area. So part of one of the things that we hope to be able to do in the coming year, maybe 2 years, is to find more elegant strategies to tease out more nuanced understandings from the kinds of documents that we currently have available, and to be able to provide a better answer. I mean, I could say all kinds of things, but it would be based on my, kind of intuition. And it really, what this project is about is to provide evidence that can inform the discussions and inform the deliberations rather than just my personal expertise.
Okay, we will take one more question, and then we're going to have some brief breakout discussions and then come back for report backs.
So yes, thank you. I wanted so first, thank you for this really interesting panel and the great work that MECCE is doing. And yeah, at OCE, we're really pleased to be part of this. I wanted to follow on your question, the link between knowledge and action. I think the question is posed differently at different ages. And something we're very careful when we do professional development for teachers or provide resources is to keep the classroom as a place to learn first. It's not a place to solve the adults' problems. So it's learning about the competencies and skills to, once you're an adult, you will have all those knowledge and soft skills to act, to do action. But I think, and this can be a source of anxiety, if the children, the school, feel that what they view as solution relies on them, that's very heavy to carry. So I think we have to be really careful to protect this learning environment of schools. Still, teach about knowledge, but also soft skills, but not put too much weight on the shoulders of the child. Now, of course, at higher education, the question is posed differently, but still we have to be careful that these remain places to learn. They are learning environments, not activism or places to solve the adults' problem again. So,
thank you, Eric. Very insightful. Okay. Maybe this one is better. Okay, we're going to move into some breakout groups. We started a bit late, so I don't know if people are comfortable staying a bit late. We've been told by the Earth Day folks that we are able to stay a few minutes later than scheduled. So I am going to ask you to have a discussion about one of the three areas that we talked about today. Let's say we'll put the monitoring and evaluation discussion over here. Put the youth engagement in ACE in the back, and then the mainstreaming ACE at COP on the right here. We'll give you a few minutes to discuss amongst yourselves. What did you think about when you were listening to our panel discussions? How could you apply it, this and what you've learned today, to your context? What kinds of questions do you have? Nominate a note taker so that we can get one person from each group to report back. Okay, break. So monitoring, evaluation, and reporting, youth engagement, and mainstreaming of ACE. So we'll give you about 5 more minutes. Make sure you're taking notes. Okay, it sounds like everyone's having excellent conversation, so I'm very hesitant to interrupt you, but I'm going to get us to do some report backs. So, yes. I think we need to interrupt the monitoring and evaluation group before they... So, all right, we've got youth engagement. I think what ended up happening is we had a monitoring, evaluation, and reporting, and we had a youth. Did you discuss youth things? Yes. So, we have two groups to do report backs with. I am going... Who is your note taker? Okay. We'll do monitoring, evaluation, and reporting first. Yeah, if you want to come back to your seats. I'm sure that the folks who are recording our video will be pleased if we're all back in our seats. The Earth Day folks will be grateful. Okay, so we've got the monitoring, evaluation, and reporting representative. Getting our thoughts collected. I can give you a minute still if you need one.
Take me years to put my thoughts together. I'm going to go to the last point because I think it's a really important step, is about capacity building at government level. So while ACE has been brought in, it doesn't mean that the government actually have a clue what it is or how to do anything. So capacity building at government level, so that can help them to develop an inclusive plan for their country, and it will make them think a bit better. One of the hard things about measuring and bringing in new metrics is whether there's an ACE plan or fund. Oh no, this was about how to figure out if a country is doing well. Is do they have an ACE plan or funding? So what sort of metrics? Is there a point in standardizing metrics? And that indicators can be counterproductive because countries can aim for the indicators as opposed to the actual, they miss out on doing things for ACE. If you have something to aim for that you have to focus on, you might not focus on something else that would be important in your country. Is ACE too vast to monitor? Seems to be a point that was coming up. Indicators can prove critical for discussions or useful for discussions. It's good to know what other countries' actions are and what kind of education processes they might have or what sort of participation processes they have. Climate traverses many subjects, a bit like health, so it can be included in a lot of the curriculum across many things. And then the measures help to identify the country's commitment as a whole. But again, that brings me back to the first step, is the country's not committed if it doesn't actually have a plan and know what it's doing in the first place.
Wow, you really dug in. That's great, good productive conversations. The ones who stayed, I think people got a bit scared and then we lost some folks, but it sounds like you had some very productive conversations. So we'll turn it over to Haley, who's going to report back for youth.
Yes. Oh, this is so much better than it was before. I don't think I'm yelling super loud. Yeah, so our group was in general talking about youth, mainstreaming ACE, clumped it together as we do. And some of the realizations we were talking about was thinking about how when we're talking with different people, depending on their kind of assigned role in that conversation, it's really important to be thinking about the expectations that might be placed on them as a reasoning behind why, for instance, ACE might be mainstreamed or not. So in terms of collecting data, it's really important to think about those assumptions and expectations behind why maybe there is or is not data on something, and if there needs to be data on something, right? I think that's really important thing that we talked about. Another thing that we talked about was just in general our experiences of being young people in the COP space, specifically on how it can be really challenging on one hand, not just finance, but because that's something we always talk about, right? Where's the money going? And because we have it, but it's not going to the places we think it should be. And the other thing we talked about in these experiences that there's a really good example with the Climate Reality Project of a capacity building and training thing that could be something that's monitored, where they empower, I think, 40 people, you said, from this country to take the same exact training on COP and climate change together in this process, and then they select 1 or 2, sometimes 3 people from that training experience to come to COP through the program, and that's a really good way to have to monitor something that's already ongoing on training of young people, which is really important. And to note, there's also other groups. I know my organization, Care About Climate, does training. That's another opportunity for data, and ultimately what it all comes back down to is partnership, which I mentioned earlier, is partnering on data, but also in those partnerships making sure they're built on not just trust, but also understanding of everyone's different roles, and understanding that those roles can be flexible as science changes, actions change, these types of things all change. It's important to have flexibility in roles in that process. I think that kind of sums it up. It was kind of an ad hoc discussion on, what's going on together, and kind of just took it and wherever we wanted to. I guess the last takeaway is, in these trainings, it's not that every single person wants to be here at COP. It could also be that people want to be trained and informed at home and be able to use that in the spaces that they occupy, whether it's a sporting event or a school club or your job, whatever it is, that there's other ways that people want to be activated. So it's really important when talking about mainstreaming ACE that we're not just talking about it at the international level, because ultimately what we all believe, I think, here is, knowledge is power, and empowered people with knowledge can also empower change. So it's not policy that's making the difference, it's people behind the policies, and that's really important to recognize.
What an excellent point to end our conversation with. I think that we see lots happening at local levels, and it's not just an intergovernmental or an international space. ACE is local, and we need to keep that in mind, which makes it really hard to measure, but that's okay. Okay, thank you so much for your time and for being up for doing some breakout groups. I know they're a little scary sometimes. It sounds like we are going to come back with really interesting things that you have given us to think about, and we look forward to being in touch with many of you now that we've met. So thank you so much. Hand to our presenters. And thank you to Earth Day for allowing us the space. Thank you so much. Oh, there's ACE Dialogue coming up, Meeting Room 1. Is that where the ACE Dialogue is? Meeting Room 1. I can't give you directions, but Stephanie knows everything about the venue, so ask her. Yes. Should we maybe get a photo before we...